Hey, folks. This is Atonuv Open Studio, getting set up. Sorry I'm a little bit late today. I've been really deep into a mix, and I hit that flow state and could not break away, which I recommend that as a way to get through your workflow. Like, once you're in the groove, don't stop, and then take a break. So, if you are just joining, this is live mix feedback. Do it every night at 6 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m.-ish sometimes. And if you want to send a track, you can send it to atonuvrecords@gmail.com, and I'll take a listen. Absolutely anything goes. Masters, final mixes, demos, rough sketches, absolutely anything. We'll take a look at what's going on and see how we can dial in your room, your mix, your approach, your workflow, is your limiter too clipped, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to start going through the submissions that we have. And how it works is anything that I've got in the inbox, I go through, and then anything that comes in while I'm going through stuff, I'll go ahead and take a look at. And then we're done with the stream after that. Been doing that for the last few days, and it's been working great. People have been saying that they like it. So here we go. I'm going to start with Scarholm's track. And looking at iDiamond version 2. Definitely looking forward to this. Scarholm does great stuff. All right. And let me just check the notes on this so we're all on the same page. Okay, cool. Here we go. And here's just a little bit talking over the intro. I know you generally like that. Just protecting this audio.
Idag speglas bilden av månen i Wien. Jag driver iväg i fantasin. Du sätter mitt hjärta i brand. Jag går på den vägen ibland. Och jag älskar livet, jag lever här. Jag stannar för evigt, jag svär. Du är min. Det var där du sa. Det var där du sa. Det var där du sa. Du är min. Ögondiamant. Oh, 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 oh. Du är min. Jag glömmer mitt namn i din famn och omfamnar eviga land. Jag vill tillbaka till där jag först fanns. Det fanns någonting där i balans. Vi flyger som får öglar ett tag. I skogen där du fanns och jag. Känslan av ren harmoni är ju sann. Men vi lämnade varann. Du är min. Det var där du sa. Det var där du sa. Det var där du sa. Du är min ögondiamant. Vi skulle vara någonstans på en annan plats. För när du går så ser jag dig. Och jag förstod när du sa att allt var bra. Att nu är inget helt okej. Tänd ett ljus för oss, vi ville bara vara. Och när du går, du är min ögondiamant. Men vi lämnade varann. Du är min. Det var där du sa. Det var där du sa. Det var där du sa. Du är min ögondiamant.
Cool. I just wanted to go back and listen to a couple of things. This is a huge improvement over the last time that I heard this. There's a lot of great frequency work. You are getting more comfortable with info from 2K to 20K. Like we've been talking about, it just really smooths it out and gives it a much, much cleaner vibe. And I brought up the frequency graph already. So that is much better. And also the strings are much, much livelier. They're starting to sound a little bit better. And yeah, super clean mix. That low end is great. Really feeling the kick, feeling the distinction between the kick and the bass. This is a solid, clean mix. So just to kind of address a couple of things, you're a little bit hot from like 500 to 1.5K. Now, there are mixes that look like this, you know, and it isn't shrieky or piercing or like overly mid-rangey, but you are pushing into that a little bit. And it's mostly in the vocals, and it's a really nice way to like make the vocals have a nice forward presence in the mix. And I would just be careful about it. You're bordering on a need to be careful from like 500 to 1.5K. So be aware of that if you're going to keep playing with this, and make sure that you're not pushing any further in that region, and maybe consider like just dialing that back a little bit, and it might be like a little bit smoother at that point. So that's great. That's a fine problem to have. It's warm. I think used a real violin. Very cool. Here is what I would do to those strings. They sound good, but they need to be put into space that feels, because the strings they sound more real, but they don't feel like they're in a real space. So I would use an impulse response reverb. Like every single DAW has one. Look for an IR loaded reverb and play around with like models of halls, chambers. You could even push into like some church verb, but try and put that string section into a physical space. Like this mix is already, it's so good now that we're going into like deeper territories. So I want to feel like those are real strings in a real place that exists. So impulse response reverb is going to be your friend there, and play around with putting them in a space. Then the other thing that I would do is the same deal with that vocal. The vocal sounds really good. I feel like it could be a bit deeper and wider, and like what I would personally do, and this is because I do it on every single thing ever. I am a walking cliche, but I do it because it works. Stereo delay into verb, just a taste of it, just to spread it out and push it out and make it a little bit bigger. That would be my move, and that's what, people have come to expect when I do stuff. So you don't necessarily have to do that, but I would put a little more space onto that vocal, a little like push that vocal into space. And that's really where I'm at, like listening to this. That snare sounds great. You're bringing in layers, you're making the track grow throughout the whole thing. Like everything that we've been talking about, you're doing. I would play around with some space stuff and then maybe look at that mid-range. That's it. This is great. Super cool track. All right, and then I have, let's go ahead, let's pull up David's. So this is a totally new track. It's a rough. We're just like listening to a new idea, and I'm going to see if anything comes to mind about where it could go. But we are, we're not really dialing in a mix. It's more like feeling out what this track could turn into. So let's go ahead and let's take a listen. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of go to the meat of it and get some thoughts. Okay, so, this is totally early days on this, but as a concept, do I think it's good? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like anything can be good. So right off the bat, what strikes me as good about this is you are constantly building interest. And this is something that um, is true in like everything that you've sent in. You're very aware of the need to constantly introduce new elements into a piece of like modern electronic dance. And like we need that. And you're very good at just like turning your arrangement around at a split second. Super awesome. What I would say is it kind of seems like we maybe need a little more time with each element before a new one gets dumped in. And, you're thinking about this as an intro, and that makes sense. I would kind of aim for this to maybe be, I don't know, if I was to just throw out like an arbitrary thing, I would say like twice as long. And let each time a new thing happens, let that new element find its space and its voice in the mix, like just, about twice as long. Because, something that's really cool is like right here, rising, 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 rising. When that vocal sample hits, I want to live with that vocal thing more. And that's speaking more, that's like also a mix thing where like that vocal thing happens and then my ears are drawn to it. I'm guessing that that's like probably because that's one of the only thing that's hitting like that 500 to 1.5K range. It's pushing mids, it's pushing excitement. So that also speaks to the mix. But we're not really talking about mixes. Yeah, it's going to be longer. Just haven't gotten around to it yet. Cool. Just checking the chat. That is the thing. I'm on like 30 seconds of delay from when the chat rolls in. So, okay, yeah. So you took a bunch of 4/4 loops and crushed them down into 3/4. It sounds smooth. Like I'm not hearing pops and like errors. So that's good. That's good editing. Like awesome work. And it will be longer. You just haven't gotten to it yet. Yeah, I mean that's my initial thought. And as far as like initial mix stuff, it's a bit light on bass. It's a bit light on sub. I'm guessing. I don't know. This isn't too ragged for a rough mix. Where you have a lot of opportunity is 250 to 500. That's gonna be your punch and like forward motion. That could get filled in, and then you're just kind of uneven from 1K to 6K, and that's where all the excitement is, and that's why like when that vocal comes in and like all of those elements, just as you mix, make sure that each new element kind of occupies a new octave in that 1 to 8K. So the first thing, and you can kind of build your mix like this because you have, especially since this is an intro that you're envisioning it as, where you're bringing in new elements every couple of bars, so you can be really, really methodical about this, and in the end it'll be awesome. Where the first melody element that comes in, give it a nice bit of presence from 1 to 2K. then the next one from 2 to 4K, and just do it in octaves, so doubles. So 1 to 2K, 2 to 4K, and then 4 to 8K. Just give them nice little, you could use an exciter or like a Pultec, like EQ, something with a little bit of vibe on it, and just give it like 2 dB from 1K to 2K, 2K to 4K, 4K to 8K on each element as it comes in. And so you're basically just stacking the mix as it progresses. So you're going to have like a kind of like a long-term riser that is that's based off of your arrangement. That is what I would. So I'm seeing that deficiency in the mix. And, if we're in early stages of composition and mixing, then we can start to use those deficiencies to our advantage. I think that's like the single best piece of advice that I could give on the mix at this stage of its existence. Is this worth pursuing? Absolutely. Also, is this an MP3? Hold on, folks. No, it's a wave. Okay. You've got like a really, really steep drop off after 8K. So you have lots of sparkle and air that you could push as well on the entire mix. Like, keep that in mind. All right. Cool. Awesome stuff. Off to a great start today. Let's go ahead and let me look at what we got. We have... Okay. Tyler sent a track in, and it's a new song. It's a friend who's working on it, so I'm going to listen to it off camera. I have 2 songs that I'm going to listen to tonight off camera, so I'm going to do them in a row. So I'll start with Tyler's. And that's also a thing. If anyone ever has something that is either copyrighted, because I don't want to get a YouTube copyright strike thing, or if it's, if you're just starting on it and you don't want the internet to hear it, you can always let me know in a message and I will play it off stream if you're wondering. So here is the track. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to mute the stream and take a listen. So here we go. All right, Tyler, that's a cool track. I kind of skipped around a little bit, just it's muted, so it's not fun for everybody. But so that's like a really solid, like classic, like bordering on kind of like a Graham Parsons or like basement types, like real rootsy, like like it's the real deal, and I can feel it in the recording, I can feel it in the song. So good work. I love this song, and so I'm gonna be like biased a little bit because I like it. Um, right off, like the first thing about the mix is you've got the guitar hard panned, and totally cool. Like hard panning guitars is sweet, um, but you have to make sure that it's counterbalanced. And the way that it's coming across is that it feels like the vocal is panned the other way, and it's either that you've hard panned your lead, or there's masking on the side that the guitar's on, so it feels like the vocal is being pulled to one side. So either of those is a problem. If you're hard panning your lead, like, I strongly recommend against it. It is technically a classic technique. Like there's Beatles tracks. So the history of stereo recording is like fraught with stuff. So in the 60s, stereo was seen as a fad that would die out because not everyone had stereo equipment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of engineers, a lot of artists were like, this stereo thing, I don't know if it's for us. So you'll hear you'll hear old recordings, like Beatles tracks, where the stereo mix was an afterthought, and there's wacky stuff like everything is on the left side except for the drums, and every single part of the drum kit is on the right side. And it's, on the one hand, it does make it very separated, and the drums are not in the way of the vocals at all. But on the other hand, it's bordering on unlistenable. So that is a thing to think about. So some of those classic techniques are really just like, those are experimental, to the point where people experimented with them and now they don't do them anymore. So and chat's on a delay. So I see that you've softly panned the vocals, and then you add a doubling with the tape delay hard panned. Okay, so what I would do is have a center vocal, and then double, and then push the double hard left and right. So the double does the stereo imaging, or you could do it with like stereo reverb or stereo delay, anything like that. If you double the vocal, but you have your lead vocal centered, and then you carve your mix around that. And is that the easy way out? Yes. And I think that, like, take the easy way out. Like, it's super standard. Like, lead vocals are centered, and it works, and then your vocal like pushes through. So it's counterbalancing. Your guitar is hard over here, and then, like, by not having something that is in the same frequency range and as intense and at about the same time, then we just feel unbalanced, and you're going to have issues just like achieving a balanced mix. And also when it goes and you're mastering it, like your mastering engineer is either going to need to like do something funky, like turn one side down to compensate. And that's never a good idea because then the stereo imaging gets messed up if you like your kick is centered. So you really can't do anything about it. So what's going to wind up happening is if one side is louder than the other, when everything's getting final compressed and limited, then you're going to have issue. You're basically going to be, your overall volume is going to be determined by one side of the mix rather than the mix as a unit. So, two ways to counterbalance, like a guitar, record another guitar and put it over there. That is going to be like your wham bam fixed method to get it. Pop another guitar in, push it over there, or do like a 45-degree pan on each side, something like that. The thing that I'll do, and this is what you'll hear on Radiohead mixes, is like, especially if you listen to In Rainbows, everything is hard panned in a Radiohead mix. And like on Weird Fishes and 15 Step, the lead guitar, the like picky rhythm cool guitar that sounds awesome, it's hard panned. And then there's a reverb of that guitar that's hard panned the other way. And that's making it feel balanced. The guitar, like this frequency spectrum that the guitar represents, is taking up the stereo field. And it's such a cool trick, and I use it all the time. And it really adds, it balances your mix. It gets that frequency spectrum balanced between left and right, because you're just taking the same thing, but it's a little bit different on the other side. So you're also getting huge stereo depth because your ears are like perceiving those slight differences, and like basically so on and so forth. And that is something to consider, like an affected version of the same thing over on the other side. Yeah. So those are just a couple of things that come to mind, like right off the bat. I think you've got great tones. Like everything is shaped really nicely. The vocal doesn't feel present enough, and that could just be the panning thing. This could be stereo issues. But I would take a look at exciting the vocal a little bit, analog style EQ, Pultec or an SSL, something like that. Just put some meat on the bones of it a little bit. Maybe something at 500 or 1.5K. Just give it some push and some meat, but also just start by centering it. And then, maybe an 1176. Yeah, I don't want to get too into the weeds with this mix because I know you're still, there's still some tracks on it that you're going to re-record. So let's just go with, first off, this song rules. Like, awesome stuff. Second off, balance out what's happening left and right. And it could be, since you're still recording, start doing some arrangement stuff. Cool. So Tyler, yeah, we'll call that good. And then let's see. EQ slotting, boring mix. Let me see what that. Scarholm, can you send me a link to it? I've never heard any. Okay, I should be back. What a bummer. Cool. Let's see if this holds. All right. So, yeah, if you could just send me a link to exactly what you're talking about, there might be like a lost in translation thing happening. But yeah, what I will say just generally is I don't really think that any mixing technique that is like if you do this, and this to your mix, then it will be a good mix. I don't think that those are generally not great. That's my opinion. Because everything is so dependent on the source material, the room that it was recorded in, what you want your final product to be, what's happening on the specific takes, what's the arrangement. When you start to do like a paint by numbers mixing technique, then you're missing out on actually listening and like feeling the music as you mix. And a lot of the best decisions about a mix come from like what I'll do is when I'm setting up a rough mix is I'll aim to just kind of flatten everything out. So, that's like one of my targets, but it's also like loose because if I don't know, if the song calls for like a bump at 500 or a bump at 60 or whatever, the vibe of the song, then yeah, totally. I'm not going to be a micromanaging insane person and just like flatten out the frequency response to just totally flat because that could be wrong. I'm going to listen, but I'm going to aim for like something a little bit flat, just like frequency wise, carving out my EQs. And that's like my first thing. But I'm also just paying attention to like the mix and the arrangement and what is the song telling me to do. After that basic rough mix, then I'm going to go in and start dialing in, effects and spatial stuff. But then the magic happens from listening to the song and listening to like each individual moment that the musician has put on like onto the recording and automating like so that guitar hook that is super sweet because you've listened to the mix like 1,000 times at this point, you're like, this guitar lick is the deal. And it's maybe 5 seconds of the song, but I'm going to make sure that I'm going to push everything that I have into that 5 seconds when that hook comes in so that it punches the listener in the face and that it makes itself super apparent. And what you're like, that is what I think makes a great mix, is being so attentive to the musical details. What is the hook? What is happening from moment to moment to moment? And how do I make that moment to moment to moment interesting for the listener? So, yeah, that's a rant. So, cool. Yeah, if you want to drop a link when it exists, / my internet seems to be mad at me. Let's see what's happening. Nope. That's a rant. So, there's me in the past. Okay, so good stuff. Okay, I have another track, and it's another mute track. So let's take a listen to that. And I have to find it. Okay, so this is a track from Brandon, who sent in they were doing a practice mix on a Cyndi Lauper tune a week or so ago, And this is another practice mix. It's a marshmallow track. So I'll be muting the stream. And before I get into this, I'm going to go ahead and do the Patreon shout out. There is a Patreon link in the description. It, supports the stream, keeps it going. And I just want to say thank you to Demeter and Mason. Y'all are stream heroes making this happen. If you want to check that out, there is you can get a shout out like Demeter and Mason do every night of the week. There's also one-on-one coaching for, we can Skype in and screen share and go over mixes that you're doing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is in the Patreon. So thank you, Demeter and Mason. All right, let's get into this marshmallow mix, and I'm going to load it in and then mute the stream for a minute. And let's see. Okay, actually, just to go over some of the things. So, Brandon was using reference tracks to do this. That's a great idea. That's always like a super safe way to mix. Like, listen to other stuff while you're doing it. Keep your ears on target, because our brain is so good. It just adapts to whatever's thrown at it. So if you're deep into a mix and if you don't have any outside reference, then your brain just goes like, the mix we're doing right now is great, boss. And it doesn't like, sometimes your brain isn't your friend. So reference tracks, that's awesome. Okay. You don't normally use a limiter on mixes. Okay. But you felt like it helped rein in the dynamics and you liked the sound of it knocking off a few dB. Okay. Don't do it. That is like my short answer about mixing with a limiter. The thing is, when you mix with a limiter, you are going to make mistakes. And okay. Yes, you do like the sound of a limiter on your mix. Absolutely 100%, because it sounds better. And the thing is we want to be comfortable when we're mixing, but we don't want to just have a magic button that makes the mix sound better that we can hit and go, my mix is better. Because then you're going to miss out on actually making a great mix. And so first off, there's that. The other thing is, if you already have a limiter on, as just like a hygiene thing, okay? First off, your gain staging and your overall dynamic presentation, like that you're working on throughout the mix, you're gonna lose your maximum dynamic range. You're just, because you're mixing into a ceiling and you just won't have the full scope of what your mix could be. You're just prematurely editing it. So, and yeah, this is another rant and a lecture, but I understand why you mixed with a limiter on, but be gone, bad habit. It's also your gain staging from like track to bus to final master. You're not going to be as dialed in, because if you are relying on this limiter to catch clips, then that means that you're clipping somewhere earlier. And so then that's a problem. Also, digital recordings, you will have full dynamic range. If your mix sounds good with your master hitting -12 or -6, oh, cool. Brandon is in the chat. That's awesome. So to directly answer your question, You put the limiter on your faux mastering chain at the very end. I thought I had too much dynamic range like last week. Is that appropriate to do at the end? Yeah. So if you put a limiter on in while you are mixing, then you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Can you put a limiter on to like fake master your track after you've made all your mixing decisions? Yes. Like if you're going to send this to friends or whoever, yeah. But if you feel like there's too much dynamic range in your mix without a limiter on, then there's too much dynamic range in your mix and you need to solve it in a different way. Like having a more consistent bass level, automating your mix so that there aren't huge jumps from section to section to section, light bus compression. There are many options, but if the solve for that problem isn't hit a limiter, like the to get like really ahead of the whole thing. So like if this was your track and it was your final mix, then you do the final mix, you export it without a limiter on. And if you're sending it to a mastering engineer, then the mastering engineer is going to do the limiter. If there's already a limiter on your mix, I will say, please take the limiter off because it's already pinned, so I can't really do anything at that point. Like the limiter is it for your track. Like once you put it on, it's done. No more should really happen after that point. Like it should be the last thing in the chain, like of the entire production. So first off, there's that. Second off, if you are mastering the track, you need to get into a mastering headspace to do a good master. So don't master on your master bus on your DAW. Export your mix and open up a new mastering session. This is like, technically it's the same, but psychologically and workflow and like how you're going to approach it, it needs to be differentiated. That's one of the things like why you don't master your own stuff is because you really just shouldn't be looking at it in your mix session and you shouldn't be thinking of it as mixing. You should be thinking of it as mastering. It is an entirely different process. So you don't want to use a mastering tool in your mix session. So if you're feeling like it sounds better with a limiter on, like while you're mixing, cool. If it feels better to mix with a limiter on, then you might just need to set up your whole system so that it's just louder. Like, in all honesty, like that's usually the answer. Like, you might just want to be monitoring a little bit louder. Yeah. So that's that. Don't mix with a limiter on. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mute the stream and take a listen to this. I'm sure that this track is good, and I'm sorry that I just like yelled about limiters for 20 minutes. So here we go. Let's take a listen. Okay. It's nice and bright and balanced. Like, that's really cool. So, to just start off, with the nice stuff, it's balanced. I think the vocal sample could be a bit, you know, more present in the mix. That's like my only balance thing. But like frequency wise, sound wise, like they all sound pretty good. I know you were dealing with a click. I kind of like skipped around because, when I'm doing the muted stream, I like to just get to the talking. Distortion in the bass. Let's see. Yeah, that sounds like maybe it's got like a bit crusher on it. I'm not sure if that's going to be fixable in post. You could try RX because it is amazing, but might not do the trick. Okay. So really nicely balanced. It is good. It has a nice like sense of space and width. And like, yeah, really, really nice brightness on it. It sounds like really, really good, like EDM, and that's what you're going for. Like, good job. So I'm gonna have to go back to the limiter thing because basically, like, it a lot of the things that I would have predicted happened. So, first off, it's clipping. So there is, it's clipping somewhere in the chain. Somewhere there is clipping, and that needs to get rooted out. It's also it's got true peaks. It's hitting like 1 dB over 0, so it's also digital clipping on the final. So clipping problem. So it is clipping, and it has this thing where you shot yourself in the foot, where the what I'm looking for on loudness, like on a master, I'm looking at 3 values: true peak, RMS, and dynamic range. So true peak is the true peak. Like, does it go over 0? RMS, that's like a average loudness over time, and you can like weight your meter so that it's taking a reading every little bit. So yeah, and then on the chat, you could have been using a brick wall, but the thing is if you're pushing it too hard, like even a brick wall will let true peaks over if you're pushing it too hard. Like, it can happen. So true peaks and then the RMS, so that's average loudness over time. And you were hitting, so what I'm looking for in like a nice, like classy master, okay, is RMS -9 to -8, hovering around there. This is pushing between 8 and like 7.5, okay? So that's like not too loud. That's like really, really close. That's like, ooh, 1 notch back. But your dynamic range, crushed to death, like DR4 at points. And that's because the bass and the kick and the percussion, it's hitting it and it's swamping your dynamic range, which it just means that there's too much compression happening, and it could be from the limiter getting hit too hard, or it could be that it's overly compressed earlier in the mix, like too much compression on the kick, too much compression on the snare. I would take a look at both of those options. Check and see if you're, like, it could be that if you just took that limiter off and regain staged everything, then your dynamic range will be nice and healthy again. But you're going to have to look and see if you've just got too much gain reduction track to track to track to track to track. Because you're in that unfortunate place where your average loudness isn't that loud, like like a classy master, which I would put out, is like -9, -8 RMS. That's like very loud. Like classic rock masters are at like -12 RMS generally. So -9, very loud. You're pushing into -7.5, which is not crazy loud. Like I've seen EDM masters that are pushing like -5 RMS, -4 RMS, like crazy. And like I would advise against it, but I've seen it happen. But because of all of this, like early on gain staging issues or over compression earlier in the mix, you're running into an issue where your mix isn't actually that loud. There isn't going to be perceived loudness, but it's crushed. So your frequency game and your balance game is on point. Like, I like what's happening, but you've got to dial in your gain staging and your compression. It seems like there might be, it's either gain staging or compression or a combination of both. So you need to look at both of those. Just make sure that, like, we want to just like add, like that kick. Let's get -10 dB gain reduction on it. You could get away with that if you're doing like parallel compression, but you still have to do it carefully. But, it sounds sweet in the moment. Yeah, so if you've got sections that are too dynamic, I would just take a look at your balance because like a lot of like overly dynamic sections can happen from just like, you might just want to automate the volume of an element just to push, just so it's has a more consistent average loudness. And check out rear bus compression. I've talked about it like 5 times on the stream, and we still have a couple of tracks to look at, so I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but rear bus compression is a really nice, safe, gentle way to just get that like nice, consistent, perceived loudness in your mix. And it's basically parallel compression on the drums and parallel compression on the entire rest of the mix. I talk about it a lot. Andrew Sheps popularized it in like all modern mixing, so you could just like look up Andrew Sheps rear bus compression. I would take a look at that, and also just basically back off your compressor a little bit and ride volume more on your mix. Just automate it more so that we don't have big contrasts of levels. Make sure that your bass, basically like bass, I want to have like basically the same volume throughout the entire track. And what I might do is bring it down 1 dB for verses and up 1 dB for choruses. I'm talking about like a 1 dB, like that bass is basically hanging around the same area with like very slight volume differences. And then same thing with guitars, like on verses, like down, or like on an EDM track, it would be like that lead synth or like a chord synth, like on a verse or like a build, take it down like 1 dB, 2 dB, and then bring it back up 1 dB, 2 dB for the big drop. So a little more conservative we can have like big impact of like, this is the soft section, this is the loud section, and actually just achieve it with like minimal volume differences. Cool. So let's call that good on this track. And then Scaron was wondering, Pensado's Place is really good. That's like a super, super cool resource. Like everyone should watch every episode. It's really good. And then who do I look to when it comes to mixing and mastering? Nigel Godrich is one of my favorites. There's like a ton. So like Nigel, and then like Brian Eno, not for like the engineering aspects, but the mind frame. Like when I'm working with a band one-on-one, I like to inhabit, if I'm not just doing like a straight mix, and I'm doing more of a production role, I like to play some of those like oblique strategy kind of mindset things during a recording. So I like that stuff and that like freedom to experiment within the studio. I really, really like Robert Smith's mixes, which is totally like that's like if I was gonna that's my wild card that I'm playing. Like I love how Disintegration sounds. Uh, that's like my go-to reference for like if I'm doing a live show, I always tune a system to Disintegration, and I'll reference it heavily if sometimes it's not appropriate, unfortunately, depending on the material and the genre. But whenever I can, I pull for Disintegration as a reference mix. I just think it's so good. I love how it sounds, and that's like one of those rare times that where like The Cure had all the resources in the world, and Robert Smith still mixed it. So I like those. I like it like lots of engineers, but if I had to, my desert island top 3, I wouldn't even say it's top 3, but I like engineers. All right. So I've got first off, Tyler is now a supporter on Patreon. So Patreon shout out to Tyler. Thank you very much. And you'll get your name on the slide starting tomorrow. I've got one track left. Snooze sent a track yesterday and they reworked it. So I'm going to take a look at it. And then we'll go ahead and call it probably. So if you are watching and wondering what's going on, this is a Ton of Open Studio. I am here every night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You could send tracks over to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. I will take a listen, do a big old live feedback on your mix, and it is a super fun time. I'm having a really good time with y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sharing the link. It is awesome. So here is Snooze's track, Two Phones. Let's hear what's going on.
Two phones, two steps, whose moves, what's next? Too much, too less, bad bitch, undress, do more, do less, too cool, clueless, bad bitch, blue dress, fat lunch, smoke sesh. If you all alone then you can go and smoke the diss. Let them run their mouth and let them go and talk their shit. I'd rather run away with the papers and the bitch. They'd rather run away with their problems and that shit. Don't know where you're going, but you gotta go somewhere. If it ain't here, then you go better find a place there. If it ain't there, then you better leave a spot here. No rush, we drop a little blood, leaving no tears. Two phones, two steps, whose moves, what's next? Too much, too less, bad bitch, undress, do more, do less, too cool, clueless, bad bitch, blue dress, fat lunch, smoke sesh. If you all alone then you can go and smoke the diss. Ayaw lang pagsabak and I whoops, whoops, feeling like.
Okay, that is a lot better. We talked about, and you mentioned in the email that you did this, just scooching the bass down. And yeah, it cleared up a ton of space, and now the vocals are way more present. And we talked about how that would just kind of take care of it. And yeah, way more vocals. They're way more forward. They're less clouded up. I think it sounds a lot better. What I would want you to do, your snare and your hat, they're too close together. And you've got nothing above 16K. So take that hat and carve it away from that like 1 to 2K range that the snare's in and push it above 16K. Let's get some air on this mix. And then I would call it good, you know? I think it is doing what you want it to do. That is where I would nitpick on it at this point.
Like I'm Curry outside when I shoot hoops. Dagan mga police do crimes. Wanna shoot. Okay, I don't really hate them though. We just try.
Yeah, so your vocal is living, and now that the bass isn't all over the place, I can say your vocal is living in the low mids. That's cool. You could take that key part and you could excite it a little bit with like an analog style EQ. Go for a Pultec, go for an SSL, or I wouldn't use a Neve here. API style would do the trick. Something a little bit pokey and spiky and icy and all that. And just get a little bit of love from 1 to 2K on that keyboard, I think would sound really good. So separate your snare from your hat frequency-wise. Push the hat higher up. We got nothing over 16K. Or is this an MP3? Nope, this is a wave. So you should have stuff above 16K. Get it up there, get some air on this mix, and spice up 1 to 2K. You could even maybe put the vocal up there a little bit. But good stuff. I like hearing stuff get better. Nothing over 16K. And great. This is really, 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 really good, y'all. I think that... Okay, yeah, that is everything in my inbox. Thank you so much for sending tracks. Thanks for hanging out. This is becoming a very, very cool place to be in my studio. So I will see y'all tomorrow. Send tracks to atonuvrecords@gmail.com. Share the link, like and subscribe, so on and so forth. It's been really good, and I'll catch you all tomorrow.